Without a nanny, the housekeeper bathed the baby in the kitchen sink. Carla Carter never imagined that an ordinary workday at the Mason mansion would change her life forever. The 28-year-old had worked as a housekeeper for 3 years in the home of businessman Richard Mason, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in New York City, and she had always performed her duties with quiet dedication, remaining invisible, as every good employee was expected to be. Then she heard a desperate cry coming from little Michael's room. He was just a year and a half old, and she realized something was terribly wrong. The nanny, Sylvia, had simply vanished, leaving only a note on the dresser saying she wouldn't be coming back, with no explanation or warning. The child's crying echoed through the empty halls of the mansion, and Carla ran up the stairs, finding the boy in a miserable state. His clothes were soaked and dirty, and from the strong smell, it was clear he'd been like that for hours. His face, flushed from so much crying, broke the young woman's heart. "Oh my goodness, how could they leave you like this, little one?" she murmured, lifting Michael carefully into her arms. He calmed almost immediately at the warmth of her embrace, his sobs gradually subsiding. Carla knew she had to act fast. The bathroom off his room had only a shower, no good for a child so small, and the main bathtub was on the family's floor, where she had strict orders never to enter. Without hesitation, she carried Michael downstairs to the kitchen. There, at the big stainless steel sink, she improvised a warm bath. With gentle movements and the know-how of someone who had cared for children before, she tested the water with her elbow, recalling what she'd learned helping neighbors' kids when she was growing up in a rough part of town. "Look how nice this feels, Michael. We're going to get you all clean," she hummed softly as she removed his soiled clothes with care. The baby began to babble happily, splashing at the warm water running over his tiny hands. Carla smiled, feeling a maternal tenderness she had tried so hard to suppress. She had lost custody of her own daughter, Sophie, 2 years earlier, after she'd been left alone with no money when the child's father disappeared. As she lathered Michael's blonde hair with care, she quietly sang the kind of simple tune she used to hum for Sophie. Michael giggled, clapping at the water, completely relaxed for the first time in hours. At that exact moment, Richard Mason walked through the kitchen door. The 35-year-old had returned unexpectedly from a business trip to Washington, D.C., a day ahead of schedule. His meetings at a federal agency had been cancelled amid a sudden government shutdown, and he'd decided to come home early to spend time with his son. Richard froze in the doorway, stunned by the scene before him. His uniformed housekeeper, in the beige dress all the staff wore, was bathing his son in the kitchen sink, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard's voice rang through the kitchen, making Carla startle. She spun around, her brown eyes wide with shock, nearly letting Michael slip in the sink. Her hands trembled as she lifted the child securely against her chest. "Mr. Mason, I can explain," she stammered, searching for words. "The nanny, she left a note. Michael was—" "You're bathing my son in the kitchen sink?" he cut in, indignant. "Who gave you permission to do that?" Startled by his father's raised voice, Michael began to cry again, clutching at Carla's damp uniform. Instinctively, she rocked him and whispered soothing words, and the child calmed almost immediately. Richard watched, confused. His son, who usually cried for hours when agitated, had settled instantly in the housekeeper's arms. Something about it unsettled him deeply, though he couldn't say exactly what. "Sir, please let me explain," Carla said, steadier now. "When I arrived this morning to work, I found Michael had been crying for hours. The nanny, Sylvia, had gone. She left only that note said she wouldn't be back." "That's impossible. Sylvia was here yesterday when I left for my trip." "I know, sir, but she's gone. Michael had been in a dirty diaper for a long time. He was rashy, and he was crying desperately. I couldn't leave a child like that. Richard picked up the note Carla pointed out on the counter. It was indeed Sylvia's handwriting. I can't continue in this job. I resign. Sylvia. No explanations. No notice. Nothing. Even so, you had no right to, he began, but he was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Amelia Harris, the housekeeper in charge of the household staff. At 55, with more than a decade working for the family, she stopped in the kitchen doorway, wearing an expression of horror. Her grey hair was pinned into a flawless bun, and her navy dress didn't show a single wrinkle. "Mr. Mason, thank goodness you're back," she exclaimed, obviously relieved. "I tried to keep things under control, but this young woman simply won't follow orders." Carla felt her blood heat. Mrs. Harris had always treated her with quiet disdain, as if she were less important than the other employees. The woman was jealous of the natural bond Carla had developed with Michael, especially because Mrs. Harris herself had never been able to connect emotionally with the child. "Control what situation, Amelia?" Richard asked, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "Sir, I told her not to meddle where she wasn't called. I said a new nanny would arrive soon, and that she should stick to cleaning." "There was no new nanny scheduled for today, Mrs. Harris," Carla said, surprised. "Michael was alone for hours." "That's none of your business, knowing the arrangements of this household," Amelia snapped, lifting her chin. "You're just the housekeeper. Your job is to clean, not to care for a child." Michael, who had been quiet in Carla's arms, began to fidget, reaching for her whenever Richard or Amelia came close. His behavior was undeniable. He felt safe and comfortable only with the housekeeper. Richard observed this with growing discomfort. His son, whom he barely knew because of his endless work hours, was clearly more at ease with an employee than with his own father. That reality stung more than he wanted to admit. "Amelia, you said a new nanny was on the way. Where is she?" Richard asked, trying to keep his voice controlled. The housekeeper hesitated, her eyes shifting. "Well, sir, I called the agency as soon as I discovered Sylvia had left. They said they'd send someone, but perhaps there's been a delay." "When exactly did you call?" he pressed. "This morning, of course." Carla shook her head, unable to stay silent. "Mrs. Harris, when I arrived at 7, you weren't here yet, and I found Michael like this. If you'd really called the agency, you wouldn't have left a child to suffer." "How dare you contradict me?" Amelia's voice rose, her face reddening. "Mr. Mason, look how she speaks to me. She doesn't know her place." "My place is to take care of what needs taking care of," Carla answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "And a crying, filthy child needed urgent care. I wasn't going to stand around waiting for a nanny who might not even exist while Michael suffered." Richard was beginning to see there was more to the situation than met the eye. Mrs. Harris had always been exemplary, efficient, and dedicated, but something about her attitude today didn't add up, and Michael's response to Carla was undeniable. "Amelia, give me the agency's number so I can call and confirm," he said, holding out his hand. The housekeeper hesitated again, fingers worrying her apron. "Sir, I don't have the number with me. It's upstairs in my room." "Then go get it." As Amelia hurried out, Richard turned to Carla. She still held Michael, who was playing contentedly with the buttons on her uniform. "Carla, you need to understand this can't happen," he said, trying to sound professional. "You were hired to clean the house, not to take care of my son." "I understand, Mr. Mason, but do you understand I couldn't leave a child in distress?" She met his eyes, tears brimming. "If it were you, if you found a child crying and filthy, what would you do? Turn your back because it isn't your official job?" The question hit home. He knew she was right, but admitting it meant recognizing he had failed as a father that he didn't even know the people who looked after his child well enough. "That's different," he muttered, without conviction. "Different because I'm just the housekeeper?" Carla asked softly. "Because I don't have a diploma or formal training, Mr. Mason. Caring for a child doesn't require a diploma. It requires love, attention, presence." Her words echoed in the silence of the luxurious kitchen. Richard watched how Michael snuggled into Carla's arms, utterly relaxed, and felt a sharp pang he couldn't immediately name: envy, admiration, or the painful realization that he was a stranger in his own son's life. "Do you have any children?" he asked before he could stop himself. Carla closed her eyes for a moment, pain crossing her face like a shadow. "I had a daughter," she said quietly. "Sophie. She's 4 now." "Had?" "I lost custody 2 years ago. When her father disappeared, I was alone, without steady work, renting a tiny room on the edge of the city. Child Protective Services decided I didn't have the means to raise her properly." Richard felt a tightness in his throat. He had assumed Carla was just another employee with no bigger responsibilities or troubles. He'd never really spoken to her beyond good mornings and good afternoons. "And where is your daughter now?" "She was adopted by a family in San Diego. A good family with more than I could give." Carla swallowed hard, fighting tears. "I get letters once a month through the social worker. Sophie is well happy, in school. That's what I wanted for her." Michael chose that moment to whisper a soft, "Mama," looking at Carla. The word struck both adults like a bolt. Carla tried to correct him immediately. "No, Michael, I'm not your mama. Your mama's in heaven, remember?" she said gently, smoothing his damp hair. Richard looked away. His wife, Marissa, had died in childbirth. Michael had never known his biological mother, and the nannies who came and went never stayed long enough to form real bonds. Perhaps that was why he'd latched onto Carla, who showed the maternal affection he so badly needed. Mrs. Harris returned to the kitchen, interrupting the tense moment. She carried a slip of paper, but her expression was more nervous than before. "Mr. Mason, I called the agency, and there was a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "The nanny they were going to send would arrive tomorrow. I thought it was today." "So Michael was left alone all morning because you assumed something wrong?" Richard asked, irritation growing. "Sir, I didn't know Sylvia had left until I arrived at 9, Amelia defended. "I thought she was still caring for him." "She left last night," Carla said quietly. "I saw her going out as I was leaving. She had a suitcase." They all turned to her. Richard felt anger rise in his chest. "You saw the nanny leaving last night and said nothing?" "Sir, I thought she was going away for the weekend or something. It's not my place to police other employees," Carla explained. "Besides, I've never had an opening to talk about these things with you. Our relationship has always been strictly professional." It was true. In 3 years, he had never really talked to Carla beyond basic greetings. She was efficient, punctual, discreet, and he treated her like part of the furniture. "Mrs. Harris, why didn't you check that Sylvia was actually here this morning before you left?" he asked. Well, I had other errands, sir. I went to do the household shopping, as I always do on Mondays," she said, though her voice sounded evasive. Carla shook her head slightly but kept quiet. She knew Mrs. Harris actually went to meet friends at a salon on Monday mornings, but she wouldn't be the one to expose that. Michael began to yawn in Carla's arms, clearly exhausted after the morning's upheaval. She instinctively rocked him and hummed a lullaby, just a soft, "Twinkle, twinkle," without words. Richard watched, fascinated, as his son's little eyes fluttered shut. Within minutes, Michael was fast asleep in Carla's arms. "How do you do that?" he asked without thinking. "Do what, sir?" "He never falls asleep so easily. Usually it takes hours, even for the nannies. Carla shrugged. Every child needs to feel safe to sleep. When they sense we're truly present, that we won't leave, they relax. The simplicity of her answer hit Richard like a punch. When had he last truly been present for Michael sung to him, or simply stayed with him until he dozed? "Mr. Mason," Mrs. Harris cut in, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was headed. "I think we should take the boy to his room and wait for the new nanny to come tomorrow. I can handle him for the rest of the day." "Do you know how to care for a toddler, Amelia?" Richard asked, realizing he had never actually considered that. The housekeeper hesitated. "Well, I can learn. It's just a matter of organization, isn't it?" Carla bit her lip to avoid commenting. Caring for children wasn't about organization. It was about love, patience, and maternal instinct. But it wasn't her place to correct the housekeeper in front of the boss. "Maybe I should take Michael to his room," she said softly. "He's sleeping well. I don't want to wake him." She started toward the stairs, but Richard stopped her. "Wait, we aren't finished talking." Carla turned, Michael still asleep in her arms. "Ma'am," he said to her gently, then to Amelia more firmly, "I want to understand what happened here today, and I want to know why my son seems so attached to you," he added to Carla. Amelia coughed uncomfortably. "Mr. Mason, with respect, you're giving this too much importance. Children attach to anyone who gives them momentary attention. It doesn't mean anything." "Then why has he never reacted this way to any of the nannies?" Richard asked, looking straight at her. "Well, sir, nannies are professionals. They keep an appropriate distance. They don't—" She stopped, realizing she was heading into dangerous territory. "Don't what, Amelia? Finish the thought." "Don't coddle children the way people without proper training might," she concluded, shooting Carla a disapproving look. Something about Amelia's words grated on Richard. There was prejudice there, Al, an arrogance he had never noticed. "Carla, you said you've cared for children before. Where?" "In my neighborhood, sir. I've always helped friends with their little ones, and of course I cared for my Sophie until I lost her." "Did you study anything related to childcare?" Carla hesitated, uncomfortable because it exposed dreams she had been forced to abandon. "I started a degree in early childhood education," she said quietly. "I completed 2 years at a state university, but when I got pregnant and Sophie's father disappeared, I had to drop out to work." Richard was silent, processing. Carla wasn't just an unqualified housekeeper, as he had assumed. She was a woman forced to abandon her dreams to survive. "Why never mention that?" "I don't think my personal story is relevant to my work here. You hired me to clean, and that's what I do." "But you clearly have knowledge and skill with children." Mrs. Harris cleared her throat loudly. "Sir, with respect, we're drifting from the main issue. This young woman crossed professional boundaries. No matter how well-intentioned she was, she didn't have authorization to bathe Michael." "And the alternative was to leave a child suffering?" Richard asked, his irritation with the housekeeper growing. "The alternative was to come to me. I'm responsible for the house in your absence." "But you weren't here when Carla arrived, and apparently you didn't check whether Michael was being cared for properly before leaving for your errands." Amelia paled. Richard was clearly beginning to question her version of events. "Sir," she said, raising her voice slightly, "in 10 years working for your family, there has never been a complaint about my performance. And I appreciate that, Amelia, but today there was a failure, and Carla had to handle it." Michael stirred in Carla's arms, mumbling in his sleep. She instinctively adjusted his position to keep him comfortable, and he settled instantly. Richard watched her instinct and felt a new discomfort. He himself didn't know how to hold his own son with that kind of natural ease. Carla, please take Michael to his room, then come back. We need to talk further. She nodded and climbed the stairs slowly, careful not to wake the child. The tenderness of her presence showed in every move. When they were alone, Richard turned to Mrs. Harris. Amelia, I want the truth. What really happened this morning? Sir, I already explained. There was a misunderstanding with the agency, and I didn't know Sylvia had left. You said you called the agency this morning, then changed your story, and said the nanny would arrive tomorrow. Which is it? Amelia shifted uncomfortably. Sir, in the confusion, I may have misspoken. I tried to resolve the situation as best I could. And leaving a child alone is best? Michael wasn't alone. I was in the house, but you said you went out to shop. I stepped out briefly, thinking Sylvia was still here. Richard shook his head. The contradictions were piling up, and he was beginning to realize he had never paid enough attention to what actually happened in his own home. Carla came down a few minutes later, having laid Michael in his crib. She'd taken the opportunity to tidy the room, which had been messy and smelled of a dirty diaper. He's sleeping deeply, she reported. He must be exhausted. Children get very tired after crying for long periods. Sit down, Richard said, pointing to a chair at the kitchen table. I have some questions. She perched on the edge, visibly nervous. Mrs. Harris remained standing, arms crossed, clearly annoyed. How long have you noticed that Michael has trouble with the nannies? Carla hesitated, glancing at Amelia before answering. Sir, I don't think it's appropriate to comment on other employees. I'm asking for your perspective. You're here every day. You must have noticed things. She took a breath. The nannies never stay long. In the last 2 years, there have been at least 8, and Michael always gets agitated when they're here. Agitated how? He cries a lot, won't eat well, doesn't sleep well. Whenever I'm cleaning near his room, I hear him crying for long stretches. Richard's chest tightened. And you never thought to tell me? I'm just the housekeeper, Mr. Mason. I didn't think it was my place to interfere or question the nannies. She glanced again at Amelia. Also what? Also, once I tried to mention to Mrs. Harris that Michael seemed to be suffering, and she told me not to meddle. That's a lie, Amelia burst out. I never said that. Sir, Carla asked softly, may I ask a question? Of course. When was the last time you spent time alone with Michael? No nannies, no one else, just the two of you? The question hit like a slap. Richard tried to remember but couldn't think of a single occasion in recent months when he'd been alone with his son for more than a few minutes. I work a lot. I have responsibilities. I know, sir. I'm not judging. I just think Michael misses his dad. What do you mean? Children need to feel they matter to their parents. Even little ones like Michael sense whether they're a priority or just another responsibility to be delegated. Silence followed, heavy and honest. Richard knew she was right, but admitting it meant facing that he had been an absent father, compensating with staff and money. Mr. Mason, Amelia tried to steer things back. What matters now is finding a new nanny and clarifying everyone's professional boundaries. Boundaries, Richard repeated, turning to her. Are you saying that helping a child in distress is beyond someone's professional boundaries? I'm saying each employee has specific responsibilities. When those blur, the house's organization suffers. And is the house's organization more important than my son's well-being? That's not what I'm saying, sir. Then what exactly are you saying? Amelia realized she was digging herself deeper. Her need for control was exposing her lack of sensitivity and skewed priorities. I'm saying we need clear rules to avoid what happened today, she replied, trying to sound reasonable. What happened today was that someone showed more care and competence with my son than any professional I've hired," Richard said, his voice edged with cold anger. "If that's a problem for you, Amelia, then perhaps we need to reevaluate some things." The implied threat made her blanch. In 10 years, she had never been questioned like this. "Mr. Mason, I'm sorry if I misspoke. Of course, Michael's well-being comes first. I only wanted to preserve order." "Order that left a child dirty and crying for hours? That wasn't order. That was negligence. And if Carla hadn't been here, Michael would have suffered even more." Carla shifted uneasily. She didn't want to be the center of a conflict that could cost the housekeeper her job, but she couldn't deny the facts. "Sir," she said softly, "maybe we can resolve this more amicably. Mrs. Harris has been dedicated for years. Today was an unusual day." Richard looked at her, surprised by her generosity. Even after being treated with prejudice, Carla was trying to protect a colleague. "You don't have to defend anyone, Carla. I just want to know what really happens here when I'm not home. Sir, we all try our best. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we get it right. The important thing is to learn from mistakes." Her simple wisdom and steady maturity contrasted sharply with Amelia's defensiveness. Richard realized he had judged his staff poorly, assuming formal education and tenure were the only measures of competence and character. A soft cry came from upstairs, breaking the tension. They all looked at the ceiling. Carla stood immediately. "May I check on him?" Richard nodded, and she hurried upstairs. In seconds, the crying stopped, replaced by cheerful babbling. "How does she do that?" he murmured, more to himself than to Amelia. "Sir, don't be swayed by cheap tricks," the housekeeper replied, desperate to regain control. "Anyone can calm a child for a few minutes." "Anyone? Then why can't the professional nannies?" "Because they follow scientific methods, they don't just give in to whatever the child wants." "And you think letting a child cry desperately is part of those scientific methods?" Amelia said nothing. Each argument only dug her hole deeper. Carla came down the stairs with Michael in her arms, smiling and babbling. The little boy reached toward his father and clearly said, "Dada," for the first time directed to him. Richard's eyes filled with tears. He had almost missed this moment because he was arguing about protocols and hierarchies. "Hi, my son," he said, taking Michael into his arms. The child nestled against his chest, but kept hold of one of Carla's fingers, as if wanting to keep the connection with them both. It was as if Michael were trying to unite the two people who now represented safety and love. "He's hungry," Carla observed. "It's past his lunchtime. Do you know his meal times, sir?" "When I'm cleaning, I hear when he eats or when he cries from hunger," she said. "After 3 years here, I've learned his routine." "And where is his food?" Richard asked. Mrs. Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the baby purees ran out yesterday and I haven't gone to the store to restock." "What do you mean they ran out? Michael needs to eat." "I was going to buy more this morning, but with all the confusion—" "What confusion, Amelia? You said you only learned Sylvia had left when you arrived at 9, and that you went out shopping in the morning. Yet somehow there wasn't time to buy food for a toddler." The conflicting versions were piling up, and Amelia knew her position was weakening. "I may have organized my day poorly. I apologize," Carla cleared her throat. "Mr. Mason, I brought some homemade puree today. I make it for neighbors' kids and always bring an extra jar in case Michael needs it." "You brought food for him?" "It's just a simple vegetable puree with shredded chicken. Nothing fancy, but it's nutritious and homemade." Richard looked at her with an expression he couldn't name. Carla hadn't just handled the emergency bath and soothed Michael. She'd also thought to bring food in case he needed it, while the person officially running the household had allowed his meals to run out. Where is it? In my bag, sir. It's in a small thermos jar, still warm. Amelia, did you know Carla does this? The housekeeper shook her head, embarrassed. No, sir. She never told me. No one asked, Carla said quietly. I just wanted to make sure Michael wouldn't go hungry if something happened. Like today. Gratitude and shame washed over Richard. Gratitude for someone so careful with his son. Shame that it had been necessary for the housekeeper to shoulder responsibilities that belonged to others, or to him. Carla, please warm the puree. I want to see Michael eat. She nodded, went to the stove, and took a small thermos from her simple bag. As she warmed the food, she hummed softly. Michael drooled with anticipation in his father's arms, clearly recognizing the routine. Has he had this puree before? Richard asked. A few times, sir, when the nannies left early, or he was too agitated and hungry. And you never thought to tell me? I didn't want to seem like I was interfering or criticizing the nannies. I only stepped in when it was really necessary. Richard watched her test the temperature on the back of her hand, prepare a small spoon, arrange everything with precise, caring movements. It was obvious she'd done this many times. How many times have you fed my son, Carla? She hesitated, uncomfortable. Sir, I don't want to create problems for anyone. How many? Maybe 10 or 15 times in the last few months, always in emergencies. Emergencies like when the nannies arrived late or left early without telling anyone, or when he was too upset to eat with them. Richard felt anger again, but now directed at himself. How had he allowed things to reach this point? How had he not noticed his son was being neglected by people he paid to care for him? And did Mrs. Harris know? Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't, Carla said. There were times, Amelia admitted reluctantly, when I allowed her to help when the situation was difficult. So you knew some nannies weren't doing a good job? It's not that they weren't doing a good job, sir. Some had stricter methods. They followed rigid schedules, and if Michael wouldn't eat at the set time, they simply waited until the next meal. And you thought that was correct? I thought it was discipline. Discipline is leaving a toddler hungry? No, sir, but, a toddler doesn't understand clock discipline. He understands hunger, thirst, sleep, discomfort, and he needs adults to respond, Carla said, bringing over the warm puree. It's the right temperature, sir. May I feed him? Number, I'm going to feed my son. The declaration surprised everyone, including Richard. When had he last fed Michael, or bathed him, or put him to sleep? Are you sure, sir? Carla asked gently. It can be a little tricky at first. I need to learn. Teach me. The humility of his request moved Carla deeply. Here was a powerful, successful man, asking to learn how to care for his own child. Of course, sir. Let's sit at the table, it's more comfortable. They settled in, Richard holding Michael, Carla beside them with the puree and spoon. First, make him comfortable. Michael likes to see the food, to smell it. Let him touch it if he wants. Richard offered a tiny spoonful for Michael to smell, and the child opened his mouth eagerly. Now slowly. If he closes his mouth, don't force it. Wait for him to open again. How did you learn all this? With Sophie, sir, and by watching other kids. Every child is different, but they all need to feel safe when they eat. Michael ate with appetite, babbling happily between spoonfuls. Richard watched each reaction, each expression, each sound, as if discovering a person completely new to him. He's a joyful child, Richard said, surprised. Very, Carla replied. Michael is sweet, curious, bright. He just needs to feel loved and safe. And he didn't feel that before? Choosing words carefully, Carla said, I think Michael often felt he was one more obligation rather than a joy to the people around him. Children sense when adults are just doing their duty. And with me? How does he feel with me? His question was full of vulnerability. Michael adores his dad, she said. Whenever you come home even briefly, his little face lights up. He waits by the window to hear the car. The problem is, the time you spend together is always rushed, tense. Tense? You always seem worried in a hurry. He feels that. He'd like to play, to chat, but your mind seems somewhere else. Richard paused with the spoon in mid-air. It was true. Even during the few moments he spent with Michael, his mind was on business. I didn't know he noticed. Children notice everything, sir. They're emotional sponges. They absorb whatever the adult around them feel. Michael took his father's hand and kissed it, smearing puree over his fingers. Instead of getting annoyed, Richard smiled, genuinely touched. He's never done that before, he murmured. Because he's never felt a calm, present moment like this, Carla said. Right now, he has all your attention. Carla, may I ask something personal? Of course. How did you lose custody of your daughter? It's obvious you know how to care for children better than anyone who's worked here. Carla closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When Sophie's father disappeared, I had no steady job. I was 5 months pregnant and no one would hire me. After she was born, I took odd jobs cleaning, babysitting, anything to survive. We lived in a tiny rented room. It wasn't much, but it was clean. Sophie was fed and loved, but CPS decided that wasn't enough. What exactly happened? A neighbor reported that I left Sophie alone to work. It wasn't true. I always took her with me or left her with Mrs. Mary, a trusted older neighbor who watched several kids. But when the social workers checked, they saw our humble conditions and decided I didn't have the structure to raise a child. They didn't consider the love and care you gave. Love doesn't pay rent, Mr. Mason. Love doesn't guarantee private school or health insurance or opportunities. At least that's what they told me. A knot formed in Richard's throat. Here was a woman who clearly loved children and knew how to care for them, yet had lost her own daughter for lack of money, while he paid fortunes to nannies who couldn't make his sons smile. And you accept that decision? I have to. Sophie's with a good family in San Diego. They send photos through the social worker. She's growing, studying, happy. That's what I wanted for her, even if not with me. But you're still her mother. Biologically, yes. Legally, no. Maybe that's for the best. They can give her what I never could, except a mother's love. The love you still give, Richard said softly. Every night before I sleep, I think of her. I send her good energy and thank the universe that she's okay. It's what I can do. Michael reached his sticky hand to Carla's face, as if to comfort her. She smiled and gently wiped his fingers with a napkin. Is that why you're so dedicated to Michael? Richard asked quietly. Not only that, Michael is special affectionate. He deserves all the love in the world. But yes, caring for him eases the ache for Sophie. Amelia? Richard turned to the housekeeper, who had been silent. Did you know this story? No, sir. We never discuss personal matters. I didn't think it necessary. Employees' personal issues don't affect the job. They don't? Richard stared at her. Amelia, knowing the people who work in our home, understanding their motivations and strengths, is essential. How can you manage people you don't know? I've always focused on efficiency and organization. And where has that gotten us? A house where my son is neglected, where someone with knowledge and dedication is underused, where problems are hidden instead of solved. Sir, Carla interjected gently, maybe we could focus on what's best for Michael going forward, rather than arguing about the past. You're right. What do you think would be best for him? Sir, that's not for me to decide. I'm just an employee. Carla, please. You clearly care about Michael and understand what he needs. I want your opinion. She took a breath and organized her thoughts. Michael needs consistency. He needs people who truly care, not just people who complete tasks. He needs to feel safe, loved, important, and he needs a present father, not just a provider. And practically, fewer caregivers, but with real bonds. Instead of nannies who come and go, one steady person who learns him and truly cares. Would you be willing to be that person? The question stunned Carla. She looked at Richard, then at Mrs. Harris, then back at him. Sir, I don't have official credentials to be a nanny. You have something more important, heart, maternal intuition, and you know Michael better than anyone I've hired. But I'm the housekeeper. You can be whatever I decide you are in my home. The question is, would you officially care for Michael? Tears filled Carla's eyes. It felt like someone was offering her the chance to be a mother again, even if not to her own child. Mr. Mason, I would care for Michael with all my love. But what if it doesn't work? What if I get too attached? What if I lose him too? Like I lost Sophie? Her vulnerability moved Richard deeply. This wasn't just a job. It was opening her heart to love a child who could be taken from her. Carla, if you accept, you won't be just a nanny. You'll be part of the family. Michael already loves you, that's obvious. And I'm realizing you can teach me how to be a better father. Mrs. Harris cleared her throat. Sir, with respect, this is an impulsive decision. Hiring requires references, verification, qualifications. Amelia, in 3 years watching Carla, do you have any complaint about her character, dedication, honesty? Well, no, but do you have any doubt about her ability to care for Michael after what you saw today? That doesn't mean... Then what exactly is your objection? Amelia realized she was on thin ice. Her objections were rooted in class prejudice and professional jealousy, not rational arguments. Sir, it's just that changing the structure so drastically. The structure already changed. Today showed the old one wasn't working. Richard turned back to Carla, who now held a sleepy Michael after the meal. You don't have to answer now. Think it over. But if you accept, you'll have full autonomy to care for Michael as you think best, without interference, criticism, or pressure. And my housekeeping job. We'll hire someone else for cleaning. Your work would be exclusively Michael's care. The salary would match that of an experienced professional nanny, actually more, because you'd be taking on greater responsibility. Carla rocked Michael gently, and he relaxed entirely, nearly asleep again. May I have a few days to think? Of course, but while you consider, I'd like you to stay today and care for him so you can feel how it would be, and so I can see how everything works. And the new nanny who was supposed to arrive tomorrow? Carla asked. I'll cancel at least until you decide. Mrs. Harris shifted uneasily. Sir, and if she decides not to accept, we'll be left with no one to care for Michael. If she doesn't accept, we'll keep looking for someone truly suitable. But I won't accept a person just because she has a diploma or references on paper. I want someone who genuinely cares for my son. And how will you determine that? The same way I determined it with Carla today, by observing how Michael responds, how the person treats him, whether there's real affection or just box-checking. Michael murmured in his half-sleep, and Carla automatically slowed her rocking, adjusting his position so he'd be more comfortable. The movement was so natural, she didn't even notice it. I'll take him to his room, she whispered. I'm coming, Richard said, standing. I want to learn how you put him down, too. They went upstairs together, leaving Mrs. Harris alone in the kitchen. She stood there for several minutes, processing what had happened. In just a few hours, the house's entire dynamic had shifted, and she felt completely at sea. In Michael's room, Carla showed Richard how to change a diaper properly, how to put on pajamas without waking him, how to set the room's temperature. He likes a little light, she explained, adjusting the shade. Total darkness makes him agitated. How do you know? Watching, sir. Over these 3 years, whenever I was cleaning near his room, I noticed he slept better when there was a sliver of light. And did the nannies know that? I told some. Others didn't ask about his habits. Richard watched her arrange the room, straightening toys, checking that everything would be ready when Michael woke. Every movement showed an intimate knowledge of the child's needs. Carla, may I ask if you accept? What would your ideal routine with him look like? She paused to think. I believe Michael needs routine, but not too rigid. He should know what to expect, but also have room to just be a child. How so? Meal times, yes, but if he isn't hungry at the exact time, we wait a bit. Bath time, yes, but if he's happily playing, let him play a few more minutes. And activities. Michael is smart. He likes music, stories, water play. He needs stimulation, but he also needs time to explore, to crawl on the floor, to get a little messy. Did the nannies let him get messy? Not really. Most were too concerned with keeping him pristine. But children learn by getting messy, exploring, touching everything. And education? He's too little for formal schooling, but he can learn plenty through play colors, shapes, sounds, textures. Everything can be learning at his age, so long as it's fun. Richard was impressed by the depth of her reflections on development. She was clearly applying what she'd learned in those 2 years of college, and what she'd lived. Would you like to return to your studies, finish your degree? I dream of that, sir, but I don't have the money or time. What if that were part of the arrangement? If I paid for your studies so you'd be even better prepared to care for Michael? Carla looked at him, stunned. Mr. Mason, that would be... I don't even know what to say. Say you'll think about it along with everything else. Michael stirred in the crib, murmured, and Carla immediately went over, humming softly until he settled again. Does he have nightmares sometimes? Richard asked. Sometimes. Usually when the day was too agitated or there were many changes. Children process emotions through dreams. And what do you do then? I stay close, sometimes pick him up until he calms. The important thing is that he knows he isn't alone. Did the nannies do that? Some tried. Others thought it was spoiling that he should learn to self-soothe. And you? A 1.5-year-old doesn't have the emotional capacity to self-soothe in fear. He needs the adults. Again, Carla's simple wisdom contrasted with rigid theories. Richard was beginning to see that caring for children was more art than science, more love than technique. They went back downstairs and found Mrs. Harris wiping an already clean counter, clearly nervous and trying to look busy. How was it? She asked, trying to sound casual. He slept peacefully, Richard said. Amelia, I need to talk with you. Of course. Carla, could you give us a moment? Sure, sir. I'll tidy the living room. Once she left, Richard turned to the housekeeper. Amelia, I'll be direct. Today showed there are serious problems in how this home is run. Sir, I accept that there were failures today, but it isn't just today, it's broader. You knew Michael was suffering from constant nanny turnover and didn't tell me. You knew Carla was filling gaps and treated that as a problem instead of a solution. I was trying to maintain order. Order for order's sake is useless if it isn't serving the people living here. Clearly it wasn't serving Michael. Amelia lowered her head. Sir, maybe I was too rigid, but I always tried to do what's best for the family. I know, that's why I'm speaking with you instead of firing you. The word made her blanch. Please give me a chance to improve. I am, but we need changes. If Carla accepts caring for Michael, you'll need to collaborate with her, not compete. I can do that. Are you sure? Because today I saw a lot of jealousy and prejudice toward her. Amelia stayed silent. She couldn't deny the obvious. Carla is good, dedicated, smart. Richard continued. She lost her own daughter, but she's poured her maternal ability into helping Michael. Instead of seeing her as a threat, see her as an ally. I admit I felt uncomfortable, Amelia said. Michael responded to her in a way he never responds to me, and it hurt my pride. Everyone has different strengths. You're excellent at organizing the house. Carla is excellent with children. Work together. You're right, sir. I can do that. And the prejudice? Let's not pretend there wasn't classism in your attitude. I grew up when hierarchies were stricter, but that's no excuse. Carla deserves respect for who she is and what she does, not for her title. Exactly. If she accepts, you'll treat her as a colleague, not as a subordinate. Yes, Mr. Mason. Good. Think about how to support this transition. She nodded. If Carla accepts, what happens to me? Does my role change? You'll still manage the household, but with less control over Michael-related matters and more collaboration with his caregiver. And if I make other mistakes? Everyone makes mistakes. The problem is when we defend ourselves instead of learning. Today you tried to deflect and blame others. That has to change. I understand, and I admire the decision you're making. How so? You could just hire another expensive nanny and keep delegating, but you're choosing to be more involved and learn your son. That's good to see. Thank you, Amelia. I hope I can be a better father. You will, sir. Carla can help a lot. They returned to the living room, where they found Carla organizing Michael's toys into small themed corners books, stacking toys, simple instruments. What are you doing? Richard asked. Arranging things so Michael can choose what to play. When everything's mixed, little kids get overwhelmed and can't focus. Does that make a difference? A lot. They concentrate better when choices are clear. Where did you learn to organize spaces like this? In my education classes, and by observing kids. They show us what they like if we pay attention. And Michael? In recent months, whenever I arranged his toys like this while cleaning, he played more calmly and with more focus. Mrs. Harris approached. Carla, can I help with anything? The offer surprised Carla. Thank you, Mrs. Harris. If you'd like, we can sort Michael's board books. They're crumpled in the basket. The two women worked side by side in silence for a few minutes, a hesitant beginning, but a beginning. Carla, Amelia said softly, you really do understand children. Thank you, and I'm sorry if I ever spoke out of turn. I apologize for treating you poorly. I can see you genuinely care about Michael. Mrs. Harris, we all want what's best for him. If we work together, it'll be better for him. It will, Amelia agreed, and I'd like to learn some of what you know, if you don't mind teaching. I'd be happy to. Richard watched with satisfaction. Maybe there was hope that both women could work in harmony for Michael's sake. A soft sound came from upstairs. He's waking, Carla said. After his afternoon nap, he's usually thirsty. May I come with you? Richard asked. Of course. They found Michael stretching in his crib, sleepy but smiling. When he saw them both, he reached his arms out as if asking for a group hug. Hi, sweetheart, Carla said, scooping him up. Did you sleep well? He babbled something that sounded like Kalla, his version of her name. Mr. Mason, he's trying to say my name, she said, emotional. Michael, say Dada again. Dada, he said clearly, smiling at his father. Now say Carla. Kalla, he repeated, clapping. It was a simple moment, but deeply moving. For the first time, Richard felt truly connected to his son, and Michael looked happy and safe. He's thirsty, Carla noted. He always wakes thirsty. How do you give him water? with a sippy cup. He's learning to drink by himself. Downstairs, Carla filled a small cup with warm water. Michael drank eagerly, then tried to grab the cup. "He wants to hold it," Richard asked. "He does. At his age, he wants to do everything himself. We should let him try, even if it's messy." Did the nannies let him? Not always. Many preferred to do everything to avoid a mess. And that's bad? It's not great for independence. Children need to try, fail, try again. That's how confidence grows. Richard watched Michael concentrate, spill a little, and then succeed. The pride on the child's face was unmistakable. "He looks proud," Richard said. "Very, and that's key to his self-esteem." Mrs. Harris came in with some paperwork. "Sir, the monthly expense report arrived." "Leave it in my office. I'll look later." "And the grocery list for the week." "Leave that too, and add more fresh toddler-appropriate foods in case Carla accepts." "Good idea," Richard added. "Carla, what foods should we stock?" "Fresh fruit, vegetables for homemade purees, chicken, fish, real food with little salt or sugar." "And he likes homemade better than the jars?" "Much better." "Why did the nannies use jarred food then?" "It's more convenient but not necessarily better." "Would you cook his purees at home?" "Of course. It's more work but more nutritious and tasty." "And would you have time for all that?" "If my job is exclusively Michael's care, I'd have time to do everything: well meals, educational play, outdoor time." The picture Carla painted was tempting. Richard imagined Michael growing up in a more loving, attentive environment. "Have you started thinking about my proposal?" he asked. "I have, Mr. Mason. It's an enormous responsibility and an incredible opportunity." "What weighs most in your decision?" "Honestly, the fear of loving him like my own and then losing him. When I lost Sophie, I thought I'd never recover. If I accept, I'll love Michael as if he were my son. If something goes wrong, if you marry and your new wife doesn't like me, or you change your mind, or 1,000 things, I don't know if I could survive losing another child I love." Her vulnerability pierced him. She wasn't just considering a job. She was considering reopening a wounded heart. "I can't promise nothing will ever change," Richard said. "But if you accept, you'll truly be part of our family. Families don't break over small things." "And if you do marry again?" "Then it will be with someone who understands that Michael already has people who matter in his life, and they're part of the package." "Do you really think that? You saw how he is with me when you're around, calmer, happier. That's not a coincidence. You bring him peace and me too." Michael, playing on the floor, began to fuss. Carla immediately kneeled. "What is it, love? Tired?" She lifted him. He calmed at once, nuzzling her neck. "He likes your scent," Richard observed. "Familiar scents soothe children. He associates me with safety and affection, and that happened naturally over time." "Carla, may I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've never seen Michael as tranquil and happy as today. In 18 months, he's never seemed so at home. Maybe it's because today he had adults' full attention because he wasn't treated like a task." "How do you make him feel like this always?" "You don't have to be perfect, Richard," she said, using his first name for the first time without thinking. "Just be present when you're with him. Put away your phone. Forget work for a few minutes. Really pay attention to what he's trying to tell you." "It's that simple?" "Simple but not easy. It takes discipline, choosing to be there, truly." He reflected. How many times had he been physically present but mentally far away? "If you accept this role, will you help me be a better dad too?" he asked. "You're already a good father. You just need to trust your instincts and spend more quality time. And yes, I'll teach practical things. How to bathe him, put him to sleep, read his different cries." Michael squirmed to get down. As soon as Carla set him on the floor, He crawled to Richard and tried to climb his leg. "He wants to play with you," Carla noted. "How do you know?" "From his movements and expression, he's energized and wants engagement." Richard scooped him up and lifted him in the air. Michael squealed with joy. "Hiya, Dada," he babbled. "He said hiya," Richard asked, amazed. "He did. Michael is very bright and picking up language quickly." Did the nannies notice his development? Some did. Others didn't pay attention, but he's advanced for his age speech, motor coordination, following simple directions. Richard kept playing, tossing and catching his son, both of them laughing as if discovering each other for the first time. "Sir," Mrs. Harris said gently, "may I prepare his afternoon snack?" "It's almost time." "Please, and thank you for remembering." While she headed to the kitchen, Carla spoke softly to Richard. "You're playing with him in a way I've never seen before. He's loving it. Look at his face." Richard looked radiant, clapping, asking for more. Pure happiness. "Carla, I think I've decided about my proposal. I don't want you to think any longer. I want you to accept. Michael needs you and so do I." "Richard, today showed me I was missing the best moments of my son's life. You showed me he's an amazing, joyful, intelligent child, and that I can be a better father." "You always had the potential," she said. "You just needed someone to show you how." She looked at Michael, trying to plant slobbery kisses on his father's cheek, and warmth flooded her chest. "I accept, Richard. I'll care for Michael as if he were my own child." "And will you help me be a better dad?" "I accept that too." "And please let me pay for you to finish your degree." "That's too generous." "It isn't generosity, it's an investment. The better trained you are, the better for Michael. And who knows, maybe one day you'll open a small preschool." Tears filled Carla's eyes. It was as if all her interrupted dreams were being offered back. "You have no idea what this means to me. It means you'll have the chance to be a mother again, even if not biologically, and Michael will have the mother he deserves." Michael chose that moment to say clearly, "Mama Kalla." Both adults fell silent, overwhelmed. The child had made the connection himself, recognizing Carla as a maternal figure. "He called me Mama," Carla whispered, tears spilling. "He's right to," Richard said, equally moved. "From today on, you're his Mama." Mrs. Harris returned with the snack and stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Richard and Carla tearful with joy, Michael babbling happily in his father's arms, a true family warmth she had never seen in that house. "Sorry to interrupt," she said softly. "His snack is ready." "Thank you, Amelia," Richard said, wiping his eyes. "Carla has accepted." "That's wonderful," Amelia replied, and for the first time she sounded genuinely happy. "Michael will be very well cared for." "Mrs. Harris," Carla said, "I hope we work well together." "I do too, and I'd like to learn from you about children, if you don't mind." "Not at all. It'll be great if we all collaborate for Michael." Richard watched the two women's interaction and felt a peace he hadn't known since losing his wife. For the first time, he felt their house could truly be a home. "Well," he said, settling Michael into his high chair, "we have a lot to plan. Carla, when can you start officially?" "Whenever you wish. Tomorrow then, and tonight you'll have dinner with us so we can start setting new routines." "I need to let my landlord know I'll be late," she said. "Of course, call whoever you need." "Amelia, cancel the nanny who was supposed to arrive tomorrow." "Already cancelled, sir." "Perfect. Then we're officially beginning a new phase." Michael clapped as if he understood, making everyone laugh. "Mr. Mason," Carla said, "may I suggest something?" "Always." "What if we all eat together tonight, you, me, Mrs. Harris, and Michael as a family?" You consider Amelia family too? Of course. She's cared for this home for 10 years. She knows you and Michael well. She's an important part of this family. Amelia was visibly moved by the recognition. It would be an honor. Decided, Richard said. Our first dinner as a new family. As Carla helped Michael with his snack, Richard reflected on how a single day had changed everything. That morning, he'd been an absent father, with a son neglected by inattentive staff. Now he felt on the path toward a real family built on love, care, and genuine presence. Carla, he said, one last question. Go ahead. Do you think one day you could call me just Richard instead of Mr. Mason? If we're a family, maybe we can be less formal. She smiled. It might take me some time to get used to it. 3 years saying Mr. Mason. No rush. And I'll call you just Carla unless you're in trouble, he teased. Deal, she laughed. Michael finished his snack and clapped, clearly satisfied. Carla wiped him carefully and lifted him from the high chair. He's full of energy, she observed. How about we play in the garden before dinner? The garden? Richard asked. Does he already play outside? He loves it. He likes the grass, the plants, the fresh air. Did the nannies take him out? Rarely. Most thought it was too much trouble or too messy. And is getting messy a problem? Not for children. They learn by exploring. Then let's go. They stepped into the wide garden. Michael lit up, squirming to get down and explore. Can we set him on the grass? Richard asked. Yes, just keep an eye so he doesn't eat dirt or leaves. Carla set him down. He crawled eagerly, touching leaves, reaching for flowers, laughing at the grass's texture. He looks like a different child outside, Richard observed. Kids need nature. It's good for sensory and motor development. Indoors is limiting? A bit. No matter how many toys we have, nothing replaces the richness of natural stimuli. Michael found a small pebble and tried to put it in his mouth. Carla quickly swapped it for a large, clean leaf. Is it okay to play with a leaf? Yes, he's at the age of exploring textures. Richard sat on the grass beside his son. Carla, sit with us. She formed a little triangle around Michael. He looked at both adults and smiled, as if approving the arrangement. He likes when we're all together, Carla said. How do you know? By his expression, the way he relaxes when the important adults are present and attentive. Important? Richard asked. Do you consider yourself important to him? Now I do. Richard and I take that responsibility seriously. Michael crawled into his father's lap and pointed at a big tree. Tree, he said clearly. He said tree, Richard exclaimed. He's in a vocabulary burst, Carla explained. He learns new words every day. Did the nannies encourage this? Some did, others didn't. But language needs constant stimulation talking, naming things, repeating words, reading. Did you do that with him? Whenever I could, while cleaning near him, I named things, sang, told simple stories. And that's why he's so advanced? It may be one reason. He's naturally bright, but he needs stimulation to reach his potential. Richard felt a pang of guilt. How many milestones had he missed? Have I missed too many important moments? The past won't come back, but the future is in your hands, Carla said. He'll grow and learn so much. Be present from now on. And you'll help me not miss anything? I will. We'll make beautiful memories together. Michael pointed at a bird, landing on a nearby branch. Bird! He cried. That's right, a little bird, Carla praised. Birds fly, he added, flapping his arms. Richard was fascinated by his son's keen observation and communication. He really is very smart. And very affectionate. He has a huge heart. To prove it, Michael pressed a wet kiss onto his father's cheek. then turned and did the same to Carla. Dada good, Mama Kala good, he said, grinning. The two adults exchanged a look, deeply moved. In a few hours, they had formed a family bond that felt solid and real. We should head in, Carla suggested. It's getting cooler, and he needs a bath before dinner. May I bathe him tonight? Please, it'll be a new experience for both of us, Richard said. They returned inside, where Mrs. Harris was setting the table. How was the garden? She asked. He learned 2 new words. Tree and bird, Richard said proudly. Wonderful. He's very bright. Mrs. Harris, Carla said, after Michael's asleep, could we go over household routines so I can understand how to collaborate without getting in your way? That would be great. Thank you for thinking of it. Richard watched the growing cordiality and felt hopeful. Perhaps a harmonious environment really was possible. Well, let's give him that bath, he said, picking Michael up. I'll get clean clothes and towels, Carla offered. Thank you. And Carla? Yes? Thank you for caring for Michael, for accepting, for showing me how to be a better father. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a mother again, she replied. In the middle of their exchange, Michael babbled something that sounded like family, making them all smile. I think he understands what's happening, Amelia said. Children are very sensitive to adults' energy, Carla explained. Michael feels we're happy and united. It makes him safe and content. Then let's keep it that way, Richard declared. From now on, this house will be a place of love, collaboration, and joy. Amen, Amelia murmured with a smile. And Michael will grow up knowing he's loved and important to all of us, Carla added. Family, Michael repeated more clearly this time, making them laugh and tear up again. The end. This is Mr. Hope. Thank you for watching. Kindly comment and like.